We begin the day with another attempt to pacify Putin for an impatient U.S. president. Donald Trump wants Vladimir Putin to stop dragging his feet on a ceasefire in Ukraine. So he sent his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, to Russia today. Witkoff was granted another audience, his third with the Russian president, in Putin's hometown of St. Petersburg. The Kremlin played down any hopes for a breakthrough ahead of the talks. Would they discuss a meeting between Putin and Trump? The answer was maybe. Trump has been pressing Moscow and Kyiv to agree to a ceasefire since returning to the White House, but has failed to extract any major concessions from the Kremlin. And the frustration is showing. Trump wrote on his Truth Social platform that Russia has to get moving. Too many people are dying, thousands a week in a terrible and senseless war, a war that should have never happened. While U.S. envoy Witkoff met with Putin in St. Petersburg, dozens of defense ministers were in Brussels to discuss military support for, you guessed it, Ukraine. The contact group was a Pentagon initiative, but the U.S. no longer wants to lead that group. So today, Germany and the U.K. co-chaired the gathering at NATO headquarters, with U.S. Defense Secretary Hegseth joining via video link. Now, the Allies pledged more than 21 billion euros of new military aid to Ukraine, but Kyiv's calls for more Patriot air defense systems went unanswered. Germany saying that it cannot provide them because it simply doesn't have them, and that new deliveries are not expected for another 2 years. What Germany's defense minister Boris Pistorius did offer was continued support for Ukraine. He was not optimistic about peace anytime soon.
Given Russia's ongoing aggression against Ukraine, we must concede. Peace in Ukraine appears to be out of reach in the immediate future. We will ensure that Ukraine continues to benefit from our joint military support. Russia needs to understand that Ukraine is able to go on fighting, and we will support it.
Well, Boris Pistorius looks likely to stay on as defense minister in Germany's new government. His center-left Social Democrats, the SPD party, they will retain the defense portfolio as part of a coalition agreement reached this week with the Conservatives. And that means Conservative CDU leader Friedrich Merz is now set to become Germany's new chancellor on May 6th. He's promising to supercharge the country's armed forces after years of neglect, unlocking billions in military spending, reintroducing military service, and setting up a new National Security Council.
Germany must improve its foreign and security policy. We are going to significantly increase defense spending. We will introduce a law to speed up planning and procurement of our armed forces, and we are going to take other measures to increase defense capability.
Well, joining me now is Julianne Smith. She has security experience on both sides of the Atlantic. She was U.S. ambassador to NATO under President Biden, and before that, she was Deputy National Security Advisor to then Vice President Biden. Julie, it's good to have you back on the day. It's been a while. It's good to see you. And I wanted to remind our viewers, you used to live here in Berlin, and that's where we want to start this discussion tonight. We just heard the incoming Chancellor Friedrich Merz talking about the incoming government's huge boost in defense spending that's planned. It's unprecedented in post-war Germany. What do you make of what is happening in Germany right now?
Well, we've seen a lot of very encouraging developments. Certainly, as the former NATO ambassador, I'm pleased to see Germany increasing its defense spending. Of course, we saw a major increase in spending with the Zeitenwende that occurred just after the war in Ukraine started. But now what's happening is Germany has decided to increase above the $100 billion or euro commitment that was made some years ago and really serve as a leader inside the alliance. So I hope we're going to see this rhetoric turn to action, and I'm excited for this role that Germany's ready to assume inside the NATO alliance.
Germany wants to expand military service sometime this year. The new government is also not ruling out a return to mandatory military service that was phased out about a decade ago. Do you see Germany building a new, bigger, better military, or does this sound like a revival of West Germany's Cold War state of readiness?
Well, I think Minister Pistorius is the first person who's going to tell you that Germany has to focus on readiness. It has to ensure that the troops that it currently has on hand are at the ready and available for future missions, that these troops are well trained, that they're equipped, and they are ready for a variety of contingencies. Whether or not Germany wants to grow the force even bigger is really a decision for Berlin. I think allies would welcome that. But most importantly, you've got to get at that readiness issue.
These changes, they will impact defense, foreign policy, domestic security, and all of these areas, they need to be able to work together. About 6 years ago, you wrote an article calling for Germany to set up a national security council, and the new government says it wants to do just that. Why is this so important in your opinion? I mean, what are the benefits of a national security council?
This is a superb and very smart decision by the incoming German team. I think it's the right decision at the right time. What a National Security Council can do is help a country coordinate its policies across a whole array of agencies. The thing about national security today is national security is not just handled in a Ministry of Defense or a Ministry of Foreign Affairs. National security now, you think about something like cyber attacks, that crosses Homeland Security, Interior, Commerce, a whole array of ministries. So by putting a National Security Council in place, the Germans will be able to coordinate their policies. They'll be able to do some long-term planning. What should their position be on China over the years? And really bring all of those national security agencies together under one roof and pursue a single policy going forward. So this is something I've advocated for, as you noted, for quite some time. They don't have to replicate the one we have here in the United States, which is really, in my mind, far too big. But I think this will serve German interests well, and I think the Chancellor will appreciate having a National Security Council.
And since we're talking about coordination, let's focus for a moment on U.S.-European coordination on Ukraine. Trump sent his envoy to meet with Vladimir Putin today, and so far the U.S. has not included Europe in its efforts to reach a ceasefire in Ukraine. And it seems that President Trump's art of the deal has no room for allies and partners. Do you think, or do you see that as being a mistake?
I would really like to see the current U.S. administration engage in a process that makes allies feel like if they don't have a direct seat at the table, that they are getting back briefed and consulted on the process. Europe has done a lot for Ukraine over the last couple of years by providing not only critical economic and financial assistance, but also by ensuring that the Ukrainians have the military assistance, the security assistance that they need. And for that reason, it seems that the best way forward would be to have both Ukraine and Russia at the table with the United States and some representation of our close European allies. What that configuration looks like remains to be seen, and there are different ways to look at it. But I think including European voices in this will be absolutely key, particularly as Europe is slated to no doubt play a critical role in the reconstruction of Ukraine once a ceasefire actually takes root.
Donald Trump appears frustrated with Russia and the pace of ceasefire negotiations. Here he is a few days ago. Take a listen.
They're bombing like crazy right now. They're bombing. I don't know what's happening there. That's not a good situation. So we're meeting with Russia. We're meeting with Ukraine. And we're getting sort of close. But I'm not happy with all the bombing that's going on the last week or so. Horrible. It's a horrible thing.
All right, so that's the word from the U.S. president. Julie, I want to ask you, what does the diplomat in you tell you about Trump's push for a ceasefire? What are the chances of success?
Well, look, we want to have a ceasefire in Ukraine. President Zelensky wants a ceasefire. Certainly, European allies would love to see that happen as well. And you heard President Trump, he's determined to bring about a ceasefire. It's an admirable goal, one that we should all work towards together. The real question here is whether or not President Putin has any interest whatsoever in a ceasefire. As you just heard, President Trump is becoming frustrated because I think he's coming to learn that, in fact, Putin doesn't seem at all interested in a ceasefire, and he is the culprit. So the pressure needs to be increased on Moscow, not on Kyiv, where the U.S. has been applying quite a bit of pressure on President Zelensky. I think now we need to pivot to Moscow and do what we can to focus Putin's mind and get him to the negotiating table.
And it seems that the U.S. wants to broker a deal and then let Europe sort out the rest. Is that fair if Europe is not even at the negotiating table? And is it realistic to leave, the active security guarantees all in European hands?
Well, look, we don't know what the security guarantees, what form that's going to take. There are different proposals on the table, but yes, let's assume for a minute that Europeans offer, as they already have, to come in after a ceasefire is brokered and provide some sort of reassurance force or an over-the-horizon force or a proper security guarantee. Europeans have stepped up with a willingness to do that, but not without some sort of reassurance and backup from the United States. So this is where the United States should be engaging its European allies quite closely to determine whether or not we can join forces and work together on whatever will follow the ceasefire. First and foremost, we have to get to the ceasefire. Again, I'm a bit skeptical that Putin is going to play along with that idea, but should he eventually get to signing on the dotted line, certainly Europe and the United States need to work together on how that will be implemented.
I want to talk NATO for just a moment with you. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio recently tried to reassure NATO members about America's commitment to the alliance. Should the other NATO members, should they believe him?
Well, look, I think allies should take Secretary Rubio at his word. I think there's a wonderful opportunity to hear directly from the president himself, and that's coming up at the NATO summit that'll take place in late June. That will be an important moment. Will allies hear from President Trump the same reassuring words that they recently heard from Secretary Rubio? I hope they will. I hope that what the president says and how he acts at the summit will give them some sense of reassurance at a time when many European allies are actually not feeling particularly assured about the way in which the transatlantic relationship is unfolding, whether it's tariffs or the war in Ukraine or some other aspect of the relationship. So what will be important to watch are those last couple of days in June, the third week of June, when the president will travel to the Netherlands to join NATO allies for a 2-day summit. And we'll all be listening carefully to how he captures Americans' commitment to the alliance in 2025 today, where it stands.
Got a final question for you about diplomacy. I'm sure you've heard the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Bridget Brink, is stepping down after nearly 3 years in Kyiv. The commander of a U.S. base in Greenland was just fired. And all of this made us wonder tonight, is America's diplomatic expertise in the Trump administration, is it being hollowed out?
Well, I certainly would hope that that's not the case. I will say Ambassador Bridget Brink served with great distinction in recent years in Ukraine. Her courage, her bravery, her innovation, her can-do spirit will be widely missed, both by the people of Ukraine and certainly by many of us here in the United States. She was a wonderful colleague. I wish her all the best. I know for her, it's a time for change change. Many of us served for quite some time, and coming out of those types of roles, obviously, you're looking to recover a little bit. It's been a very stressful role. What I want to see is that this administration respects all members, career civil servants, members of our military, and gives them the respect that they deserve.
Former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Julianne Smith. Julie, it's good to have you on the program tonight. We certainly appreciate you taking time out of your, I'm sure, what is a very busy schedule on this Friday night to talk with us. Thank you.
Great to see you. Thank you.